I need some traction.
What I want to do is talk a bit today about AI in an actionable way for the growth stack. I think there's a lot of confusion about what AI is and how it can help you take your business to the next level. And my goal is to give you the definition, to talk about the applications, and then to go through 10 questions you should consider when you are looking at AI solutions. So AI is becoming, I have a little bit of an echo. Let me move out of here. AI is becoming a really important part of the marketer stack. As you can see, marketers are using artificial intelligence more than ever before, and they are using it to drive double-digit growth. We also see that it is coming up in the sales stack as well. So what is it? So AI really has 4 steps. Process data, identify patterns, predict outcomes, and the most important one is incorporating your findings. So it's not AI if that education cycle is not part of the equation. So let's talk about what this might look like. So let's say that you are currently doing segmentation, and your segmentation is something you do by looking at your ACV. Sorry, I think I'm a little nervous. Ignore the shaking, I think it'll go away. By looking at your ACV, by potentially looking at a couple of different segments, doing a little analysis, saying I'm going to put it through a linear equation, now I'm going to predict my revenue. So with AI, you could take a lot more data in, have a much more granular process, and get much more specific predictions on what would happen. So the other thing is that AI is not a linear process. You are basically putting content into the system. You are identifying a few of the predictions or outcomes that you would like to know, and the system teaches itself. And that's really what makes it so different. So let's talk about some of the applications that this is used for. In the growth stack, you really see this used for 4 different things. You see automation. You see personalization, especially in the marketing world. You see conversation. This is where you see chatbots, and when you get into deeper learning, you see things like Alexa. And you have insights. And this is really the ability to predict at the next level. So let's talk about some of those key algorithms and what they do. The one that people are most familiar with is machine learning. And machine learning sometimes gets mixed up with AI. You know, you hear them interchangeably. They're not actually interchangeable. Machine learning is always AI. AI is not always machine learning. There's also, for example, deep learning, which I mentioned with Alexa, and other algorithms in the system. But what machine learning does is it takes large quantities of data into the system in a way that a human could not mimic, and it figures out inferences, and it makes those predictions. And those things are done off mathematical equations, which is why a lot of people say, what's the difference between AI and the complicated equations I already have in my system? The next one is segmentation, which sounds exactly what it sounds like. This is about taking your segmentation to a level of granularity, almost down to n equals 1. And what that allows you to do is to do a level of targeting in your system that you cannot currently do in the ways that your customer has, in the ways that is going to delight your customers. The third one is computer vision. I feel like this is the one people are most familiar with. And computer vision is when you think about Facebook, and you see Facebook suggesting tags. That is computer vision. The system is crawling the visual. It is doing pattern recognition. And then it is building a database of patterns that it can name. So it doesn't actually see the picture. It's looking at a pixel level and determining what things look like. The next one is NLP, natural language processing. Now, this is used, I think the most familiar way people know of this is with chatbot. So this is used to build a schema of information so that you understand the grammar, the tone of content, and that you can identify how to output, either for something like a retail catalog, which is what we do with it, or to determine what you're going to put into your chatbot or conversational component. The last one is multivariate algorithms. Actually, I think I have one more after that. And what this does is it takes in large quantities of information. You can see that there's a theme here. It's all about the quantity of the data. And it is basically an A/B test on steroids. So it is literally multivariate, and the system can run all of these combinations automatically and figure out what's best. So you no longer have to say, I want this visual, or this content piece, and that content piece. The system will do that level of sophistication for you. And then the last one is predictive analysis, which I've referenced a couple times already. And predictive analysis is the ability to use the data, use historical data, turn that data into something you can apply to current data to make future predictions. So let's talk about what this means for customers. So from a customer perspective, this means, or from a company perspective, this means more targeted outreach, a better ability to personalize. For the customer, it's about not having linear costs when you're servicing them. And for analytics, it's about you being able to provide them a better product. For them, with sales, it's about having a better buying experience. For marketing, it's about improving their discovery so that they aren't searching around for your site trying to figure out what they should be learning about. On the customer side, it's about reducing response time and letting them self-serve, which FAQs hopefully are a thing of the past at that point. And then for analytics, again, it's for getting that product fit right. So there's a ton of companies out there. I intentionally did not make this large enough for us to spend our day on it, but and this is by TopBot if anyone wants to go look for it on the web. The most common applications that we see in the growth stack are the following. I'm not going to go through every single one. We talked a bit about marketing automation, data enrichment. So on the sales side, data enrichment is incredibly important. And the more you can enrich, the less work you're doing in lead mining. And so that is an incredible opportunity for all of us to improve the effort that it takes on the business. On the other side, we've got personalization at a location, a placement, and a price perspective. That's something that LimeSpot does in the retail space. We have chat bots, and we also have the social component. So let's talk about the 10 things you need to think about as you're considering AI solutions. First one is you have to put good data in to get good data out. So you want to consider what your training set is. And that is it large enough? Do we think it's good data to use as our foundation? Is that something that's coming only from internally in your use case, or are you mixing it with external data? It's really important to think about that data and whether or not, so if you're doing historical data, is it really worth bringing in 2 years of data? In that case, more might not be better if the behavior of your customers, for example, has changed. The second is to have a cleaning plan. And no mops needed here, but what we're talking about here is pulling out the outliers. If you imagine you're putting this data in to be able to train a system, then you don't want the outliers to muddy the system. So you want to think about, are there scenarios in which your data, these items should not go in your system? And let me give you a really recent example for us. We have a customer who has both consumers going through their site and distributors going through their site. And if we were to use, and the distributors are buying a large volume of products, but they have a specific agenda. And so if we were to use that distributor data, it would mess up the consumer experience. And so that's a place where you have to be able to say, is all of this data appropriately relevant to the problem I'm trying to solve? The third piece is to understand the feedback loop. What information is coming back into my system? Because your system will only be as good as that feedback loop allows. So in a perfect world, you want every single data point that you've been put out to have a result and have that result go back into the system. And that's how you're going to get an optimal predictability on what the best product is. Then the next set is things that are happening inside the system. So beware of biases. My team was talking last night about the pharmaceutical industry. And if a pharmacy decides, or a pharmaceutical company decides they're going to take data that they have to determine the frequency of a customer needing a medication, guess what? It's going to be really high. It's going to be higher than the average because they don't have a representative sample set. So it's really important to think about that component. The next is ensure you're still in control. I think there's some fear around AI, and that fear has to do with you're taking your hands off the wheel. And it's a black box, right? So what you want to know when you're buying a product is are you able to have a spectrum of control where you can set the parameters, or you can add to the data on a ad hoc basis, or you can put weightings around things, and therefore you can make sure you control the outcomes. Number 6, understand how your data is being used. And this is just, is my data going back into a system that is helping a broader set of companies? And if so, is the whole greater than the sum of the parts, or are companies getting a disproportionate advantage by having your data go in the system? Next is privacy and regulatory issues. And I think in the PII world, this is especially important. If you have personal data going into a system, you want to make sure that what comes out of that system is anonymized data, and that the personalized data does not cross the boundary of your organization. And then the last 3 are the impact on the organization. So this is, identify who this product is going to impact and how it's going to impact them. You may need a different skill set in order to, in order for this to still make sense inside your org. Design processes, I think this is pretty self-explanatory. And then the last thing is make sure there's a clear ongoing path to measure value. Sometimes when we buy a product, salespeople do a really good job of telling an upfront ROI. And then you're 6 months in and you're like, am I getting any value out of that? So make sure there's, whether it's a percentage of your data or your experience that's not going through the system, or whether there is a dashboard page, you really want to make sure that you can continually see the ROI on your organization. All right. Thank you.
I need some traction. You need some traction. Let's get some traction.